welcome back. Today you are in for a treat. We are going to have a good old-fashioned rant review. Today's book is Don't Look Back by Jennifer L. Armentrout, and oh my gosh, this book was so boring, so underdeveloped, so cliche. It literally put me to sleep every time I opened it. I thought it was going to be fantastic, and I think that is when you get the most let down, is when you expect a whole lot and you get very little. The premise of this book, which is fantastic, is about a teenage girl named Sam who disappears along with her best friend Cassie. She turns back up with no memory, but Cassie is still missing. So we have to figure out what happened to the girls, where is Cassie, and what memories has Sam locked away in her brain about the night that they went missing. Now, I'm going to just jump right in with a spoiler and tell you it was Sam's dad. Or should I say Sam and Cassie's dad, because one thing about Sam is she's uber wealthy, and I don't know what it is about people. Maybe it's our innate desire to fit in, but we love books about the uber popular. And so that is what Sam is. She's like the most popular girl in school, and she's also the penultimate mean girl. But her dad had married her mother, who was the wealthy one in the family, and he was essentially a scholarship student. I don't know why she married him. It is overly emphasized how much she cares about appearances. So why she married him, I don't know. Like, I get it, people marry for love. There is no love in this marriage. So yeah, there's really no explanation as to why they got married, but he has an affair early enough in the relationship that Cassie and Sam are the same age. Somehow Cassie finds out. The mother was supposed to leave town, never to be heard from again. I guess because she's a single mother and she can't afford it, she moves back to town in with her father, who is extremely wealthy. Somehow Cassie finds her birth certificate, which was not supposed to list the name of the father. It does, so she knows. And so I'm guessing this is the point where she decides to befriend Sam, which they're like 10 or 11 years old. And this is something that's really never explained, because I thought Cassie was the most interesting character of the novel, yet we get very little about her. Like, we get surface level information, but we don't get any motivational information. She befriends Sam, and Sam, I guess up until she was 10 or 11, nice kid. And then under Cassie's influence becomes this I can't say that word either, this penultimate mean girl. So for the next however many years, 6, 7, 8 years, they are like frenemies essentially. And at the point where they disappear, Cassie has decided to confront their father, who Sam does not know that Cassie is her half-sister, but Cassie confronts the father. He, again, this is really vague as well, he pushes her, I guess. Anyways, he has a hand in her crushing her skull, and then she falls over because it takes place at these waterfalls. I guess she falls into the river, does whatever. Sam, whom Cassie had texted to come see her, I guess she wanted Sam to be part of all this. I don't really know. Again, we never get Sam's full memories. Like, there's a lot that goes unexplained. In any case, Sam witnesses this whole event, and this is not really fully explained either. I guess after Cassie gets hurt, she leaves her hiding place, and then her dad injures her as well. I don't know if he pushes her. I don't know if maybe she runs to go check on Cassie, she slips and she hurts herself. In any case, this also makes no sense. It's described as like 100-foot drop, so I don't know if they're on a lower plateau. I don't know if they're up at the top, but as it's described, there's no way Sam could fall and not get hurt. Yet, when she is discovered, the only thing wrong with her is a missing memory and some cuts and bruises. No broken bones, nothing major that would have indicated a great fall onto a hard surface. So what happens, I guess, is when she falls and gets hurt, her dad is able to come to wherever she is. Again, this is all super vague. And so he comes to basically check on her to see that she's okay. He assumes she's dead. And so he takes her cell phone and he doesn't even try to help her. How does she end up? I don't even know. Like, does she end up in the river or not? I don't know. I don't care. This was such a bad book. But when she does come to, she's able to walk out onto the road, and this is when she's discovered by the police and blah, blah, blah. The whole deal is they share a dad. He doesn't want Cassie telling people that he's her dad because then it jeopardizes his marriage because there's basically an infidelity clause. And even though there is no love in the marriage, he would lose everything because he works for his wife's dad. He would then have no money because he would not have her and her income or her inheritance. He would have no job because her dad would fire him. So he's like, I like my life, so I'm gonna kill you. Or he calls it an accident. As I said, it's really vague because we never get those particular memories back. Now there's the big revelation. I will say that of the novel, the beginning is the strongest. I did have some issues with it because it felt disjointed, but I will give it grace because Sam is coming out of a fog, of a funk. She has no idea who she is, where she is, what's happened. So I will accept the disjointedness because to me, it does go well with lack of memory, okay, of kind of coming out of a fog. However, from there, I thought what really dragged this novel down, as I said, the characters are incredibly cliche. They're very flat. And Sam, when she comes out of this fog without her memory, it's like a clean slate. It's really interesting. I love the human brain because while she doesn't remember her parents, she doesn't remember her brother, she doesn't know her own name, she doesn't know her friends, she can still read, she can still write, she can still do math, she knows how to walk. So it's just really interesting, the things that will always remain in her brain and then the things that even though her parents raised her, they are no longer in her brain. She comes out a clean slate, and part of this could be my lack of understanding of how trauma works. But I was really bothered by the fact that she had this snarkiness to her because I thought it would have been more effective. It probably would have been more boring, which is why Armentrout did it this way. But I thought it would have been really effective if she had kind of been neutral. Like a newborn baby who has to figure everything out. She has to figure out who people are. She has to figure out who herself is. And so the fact that then we got these little snarky moments, these little judgmental moments, especially in the beginning when she's in the hospital, they didn't feel right. They didn't feel appropriate. And we just kept getting that because we kept getting, oh, I don't know who you are, but then I'm going to have this really judgmental thought about you. For me, it did not fit with a character who isn't supposed to know anybody or anything. So how could she have formed opinions? Eventually, you do see ghosts of memories, and so I'll accept that. Like, if she suddenly remembers a phrase that she and her friends used all the time, like, I will accept the fact that that pops into her brain. But in the beginning, I just didn't think it was appropriate, and it prevented me from connecting with her because I was like, how can you be two different people at once? Throughout this book, you realize you don't like who you used to be. So if none of that was a core part of her being, then how can her snark be a core part of her being? If who she became was because of Cassie's influence and not because it came naturally to her, then why is that what she continues to hold on to? I I just couldn't. I will say though, in terms of the amnesia, I really liked the juxtaposition of the two personalities, of how she could see her behavior for what it really was. She was like, I said things like that about people. I behaved that way with other people. Like, I did these really awful things. Like, what kind of person was I? I don't like that person. Or her friends. She was like, why are we talking about people like that when it's completely untrue? And of course, then they're like, well, don't you remember that you said something even worse? And she's like, oh gosh, like, why would I want to be that person? So I really liked how she had this clear perspective and how she didn't just revert back to her former self just because her former self started to come back to her. That was handled well, but on the whole, I would like to know how much research Armentrout did into short-term memory loss. I saw someone post something on Instagram recently about really enjoying another series of this author's. The most recent book in that series had come out, and so they were really excited about it. And I just commented, and I was like, well, hopefully that's better than the one that I just read. And they're like, yeah, you know, there are certain things of hers that weren't that successful. Obviously, I would have to read this series that this other person is so excited about to know if I agree, if Armentrout can write at all. But to some people, she can write. And it's interesting because I did some Googling, some researching, and there was one girl who reviewed this book, and we shared the same opinion, although she thought the plot was really great, and I was like, the idea of the plot was really great. The execution of the plot, not so great. But then the 5 or 6 commenters all disagreed with our thoughts, our opinions, and you know, that's the beauty of literature, that's the beauty of writing and reading, is that it is subjective versus objective, which is why Holly Black is so successful. If it were up to me, her books never would have made it onto the shelves, but most other people think they're fantastic. So there we go. I thought it was interesting how people were like, oh yeah, I really liked the romance between Sam and Carson. And to me, I'm like, what romance? Like, it was cliche. I did like their initial meeting because her brother, she has a twin brother named Scott, he's telling her she has a boyfriend and this boyfriend is coming over. And so then this dude appears in the doorway and Sam is blown away by how gorgeous she is. And she's like, oh, is that my boyfriend? And the dude's like, right, whatever. And it turns out to be kind of her, not her arch enemy, but he is the son of the help. And so he's like we would ever date. I hate you, you hate me. So I do enjoy that first meeting. But from there, I have friends who were very close to me at one point, and we have had fallings out whatever. And I do still miss them. There is a part of me that will always love them. So I guess that is what she or he are holding on to, because they had been very close friends up until Cassie entered the picture. Although, caveat, she's trying to reset her passwords, okay? And in order to reset a password, you have to have a question and an answer, just so that whatever site you're trying to reset your password knows it's you. And he is her answer for it. And I'm like, so that was something she set back when she was a mean girl. So that I did not buy. I did not buy that she was still holding on to Carson even as a mean girl. But I can buy that he and she can be holding on to this now. The romance can bloom a little quicker because as soon as she stops being a mean girl, he can let down his walls. But it was super cliche. All of their interactions, like really inappropriate, sexually charged. I could accept it going faster, but it went too fast. It was like encounters in the hallway where she knocks him over because she's not paying attention, which if she is a petite girl and he is a 6 foot something sturdy guy, In what way is she able to knock him down, even if she's not paying attention? I just don't see her being able to run into him with enough force to knock him off balance to the point that he can fall onto the floor and she falls on top of him. So then they're connected in sensitive places and she can't move. And I'm like, Or there's those moments where he's just too close. She can feel his breath on her skin, his eyelashes, his long lashes batting against his cheeks. Guys, I'm just saying. Maybe you like that, but this is not a romance novel, okay? That is not the purpose of this book. This is a mystery novel. So why are we getting all grossly cliched with their little love story? I liked Carson. I did. It wasn't about me not liking him. I liked him as a character. I didn't like Sam as a character, but I didn't like the way that Armentrout brought them together. I thought she was like, all right, they need to be in love, so I'm gonna do it. It didn't work for me. It didn't work for me at all. Obviously, as I've already spoiled for you, her dad is the bad guy. He is the culprit. And for me, it came as a surprise. Other people that I read, they were like, yeah, I kind of picked up on it because there are a lot of mentions as to how much that Cassie and Sam look alike. So we all know me. I read the end of the book first. So I don't know if I would have been picking up on those clues if I didn't already know what they were alluding to. But a lot of people did say that was not too much of a surprise. I kind of liked it because her dad, even though it really creeped me out the way he called her princess, I don't know why it creeped me out. It just felt oddly intimate, especially because it had been a nickname she forbade him from using. So why is it that as soon as she loses her memory, he's like, it's appropriate to call her princess again? Like after 5 or 6 years, he just jumps back into that old habit. As far as all of the interactions that we get with him, he doesn't show any signs of being involved. And I like that in a villain. I like how in retrospect, you see that their behavior is suspect. Like you see the clues, but in the moment, you're like, no, he's just her dad. He's just glad she's okay. For me, him being the culprit, even though it didn't really take a long time for me to jump to the end to find it out, I was surprised, and I enjoy being surprised. As surprising as that might be. Cassie, as I mentioned, probably my favorite character. I felt like she had the most depth to her. I enjoyed the moments where Sam had flashes of her. I will say that they were a little confusing. Yes, the visual flashes I knew were imaginary, but the things that Sam heard, I didn't always know where they came from. But I wish I could have gotten more Cassie. I wish I could have gotten more of why did she befriend Sam in the first place? Who was it? Somebody compared her to like the Wicked Witch syndrome, where like from Once Upon a Time, where she just wanted to take everything away from the evil queen. And so I want to know why. As a 10 or 11-year-old, I don't really know what kind of interactions they'd had before that. But as a 10 or an 11-year-old, how can you hate someone that much already to want to take everything from them, especially if you don't even know them? Because at that point, Sam was a pretty decent person. So it's not like Cassie said, oh, she's a mean girl and I want to take her down. Maybe it's because Sam looked like she had everything. And so Cassie was like, I want to take her down. I wish that we could have gotten more about Cassie's background, about maybe how she figured things out, her motivation for being Sam's friend. At the point where they disappeared, they were frenemies. What were Cassie's thoughts? What was she doing to actively take Sam down? Why did she want Sam to see her confronting their father? I mean, like that one seems pretty obvious, But because we don't really know Cassie's motivations, we don't know if it's because she wants Sam to know the truth or to break Sam. And then, if she wants to break Sam, why doesn't she want to break Scott? Because they're twins. Like, wouldn't she see Scott as much of a rival as Sam? And speaking of Scott, I didn't mind him so much, but who I did mind was his girlfriend, Julie. I think it's Julia. In any case, she had been Sam's best friend before Cassie came along. Or no, not really. Julie had been good friends with Sam until maybe a year or so prior, which is around the time that Julie got together with Scott. According to the book, Sam had given her an ultimatum and was like, if you date my brother, then I want nothing to do with you. Julie goes through with it. Sam goes through with her threat, and they're no longer friends. Scott, though, says that Sam stopped being friends with Julie because Julie wore the wrong color pants or something. Maybe Scott is just being facetious, but in any case, we don't really know why Sam dumped Julie. It's kind of like with Cassie, where we just don't get enough of pre-Sam Sam. Then when Sam, after losing her memory and is fed up with her snarky girlfriends, dumps them, she jumps right back in with Julie, and Julie's like, open arms! If somebody had snubbed me that way, if they had hurt me that way, I would be like, I don't know what the time frame is, like how much time has passed from Sam waking up to her dumping her friends and, hanging out with Scott and Julie and Carson. But it would have taken a lot longer than that for me to trust this person again. But Julie's like, yeah, all's forgiven. Let's go shopping. You're the best. Again, and so let's talk about the friends, though. So the friends, there's Lauren, Candy, and Veronica. I don't really know which one is actually worse, Candy or Veronica. I get the sense that Veronica is the worst, and so whenever she's around, Candy gets worse, but Candy's kind of harmless without Veronica. But then there's Lauren, who I kept expecting a personality from, who I kept expecting big things from, because Armentrout made a point of pointing out every time Lauren did not participate in the snark. And so I was like, okay, so what's going on with Lauren? Maybe Lauren's the bad guy. Maybe she seems all innocent and she's really not. And we never get anything. It's kind of like with Candy and Veronica, where all we get are their mean girls. And I have said this before. You cannot just be bad to be bad. We all do bad things, and it's not because we want to be bad people. We have a motivation for everything we do. Even Draco Malfoy, or Snape, they seem like an out and out bad person, but they all have their interior motivations. So what is it that makes Candy and Veronica bad people or mean people? We never know. I mean, I think it's Veronica, one of the girls wants Sam's boyfriend. So, okay, I can see her being mean to Sam because she's jealous. But honestly, we never really get any explanation. It's just, we can be mean because we're popular, because we're pretty, because we have money. That's just not enough. It just kind of reminds me of Carson and a little bit of Sam. Somebody, a review that I read, pointed this out. It hadn't occurred to me until that point, where we know Carson is ambitious. We know he's smart. We know that he has a lot at stake. Like, he needs to make good grades in order to stay at this expensive school so that he can keep his scholarship and go on to college. What does he want to do in college? What does Sam want to do? Like, she's going to go to Yale. Carson's going to go to Penn State. These are good schools. What do they want to do there? All we know is that Sam is going to go to Yale because she's a legacy and because her boyfriend's going there. But even when she's asking her boyfriend, about herself. He's like, you like to shop and you're dramatic. And then she's talking to Carson, and Carson is telling her things about her, like basically her younger self, because I don't think he knows her current self. And so she's like, well, this guy obviously knows me, and this guy obviously doesn't know me at all. But still, who is she? Like, what does she do now? Yes, she was a daredevil back when she was 10, but now that she's 17, who is she? We really never get any of that, because even though she does start getting her memories back, she only gets memories that are prevalent to Cassie's disappearance, or prevalent to, hey, maybe this is why I should suspect Scott, or hey, maybe this is why I should suspect somebody else. But we never really get any memories of her doing something about herself. It kind of reminds me, her mother early on brings up photos, and we can all infer what photos relate to. Something they shouldn't be relating to, because we shouldn't be taking pictures of certain things, right? And this is going back to my point where, how can she have any sort of personality when she doesn't even understand things like photos? If she doesn't understand what photos refer to, how can she be making judgment calls about people? Okay? If she's not aware enough as to the photos implication, how is she aware enough to have snarky things to say? So there's the photos that her boyfriend takes of her. She eventually learns that she was doing something she shouldn't have done with him, and he recorded it or something, and then it accidentally got leaked to his best friend, who then shared it with the rest of the baseball team, who then let everybody else know about it or something. I don't know. I don't care. At this point, I was probably like, meh, meh, meh. But in the flashback, we see how she's super angry about it, and she says, we're done for good this time. I mean it, because she didn't even know that it was happening. And then her boyfriend, whose name is Dell, is like, you know that you're never going to go through with it. So the implication then is, yeah, she didn't go through with it. They stayed together. And now she's wondering why. Why did I stay with him? It's not like with her parents, where her mother was afraid to divorce her father because of how it would look. So why is she staying with her boyfriend when he does nasty things to her? Another little thing about Dell is, obviously they have no chemistry. And she is seeing this, and she's much more interested in Carson, but she's trying to be honorable and stay with this guy that she apparently loves. So we keep getting this thing from Dell about, oh, I'll always be there for you. I'll always back you up, and I'll believe you. I'm like, what in the world is he talking about? And then it comes that he thinks she killed Cassie because she learned that he and Cassie had slept together. He's assuming because she got a text from Cassie and she was angry that she then went and killed Cassie, and so now he's just trying to have her back. None of this makes sense to me. None whatsoever as to why they're together, as to why she even likes him, as to why he would stick up for her when he obviously doesn't like her that much. Maybe it's the sexual aspect of the relationship, but it seems to me he could probably get Veronica to do that with him. I don't know, but yeah, there's just so many things about these characters that don't make sense, that leaves them flat, and also in that there were just too many characters. There was Carson, Scott, Julie, Sam, Dell, Veronica, Candy, Lauren, Sam's parents, Cassie, so that's 11, Cassie's mom, Cassie's grandpa, just so many people, and Armentrout did not take the time to develop any of them. She could have cut down. Oh, and then there's Cassie's ex-boyfriend, I think is Trey, who is Dell's best friend. And I'm like, why was he even necessary? Like, so many characters that we could have done without. That could have made, like, we would have these scenes where they all get together, yet only 3 of them talk. What's the point? Like, what is the point in having all these characters if they're not gonna contribute? Okay, so last thing, Sam kept receiving these notes, and they're supposed to be basically threatening notes because somebody knows something and they're telling her to keep her mouth shut. And this is a spoiler. She writes herself these notes. And what I don't understand, so first, I was like, okay, because I knew her dad was the bad guy, I was like, maybe he's writing them. Because she's not really sure how they end up where they end up. She finds one under her pillow and she's like, who was in the house that could have done that? There are quite a few people that could have been in the house that could have done it. Or there's one that shows up in her school bag and she's like, I don't know if it had been in there and when I pulled my book out it came with it, or if maybe somebody just threw it in there. So, there's all these things that I'm like, well, maybe her dad did it because he's the bad guy, so he has a lot of answers. So maybe he's slipping her these notes. And eventually what we find out, because she has this episode, what she is doing in order to regain her memory is visiting places that she's familiar with that might spur her memory back into action. So she goes to the falls and then she thinks she sees someone. And so in her attempt to get away from this person, she gets in her car and she finds another note. She puts it in her bag and then she sees the guy in the back seat and she has an accident. When she wakes up at the hospital, her brother's like, you never had your bag with you. So at this point, we're trying to figure out how sane is Cassie? Because are these notes real? Well, they have to be real because she's shown them to people. Which, if she had written them, wouldn't they recognize her handwriting? Wouldn't she recognize her handwriting? And then, of course, now we're wondering, is she seeing things? How much of what's going on is real? Eventually, I honestly don't remember the specifics, but I think she and her family are in her room and they're thinking that she's going cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. And so she's like, no, these notes are real. And she shows them to her dad. He's like, that's your handwriting. So as I just said, why didn't anybody else notice that it was her handwriting? And then why is it at this one point, it just comes out of the blue, that's her handwriting? I guess she goes to see a psychologist. Honestly, by this point, I am skimming. I just don't care. And so she's on, I guess, antipsychotic medication or something. And where was I going with that? Maybe I should be on antipsychotic medication. Oh, I know. She's seeing this therapist, she's on this medication, and the whole deal is so that she can stop seeing things. And she's like, oh, these notes are real though, but all this other stuff isn't real. And so you're like, the notes could be good, but they're just so confusing. And they're essentially Sam telling herself, don't open your big fat mouth, even though she doesn't remember anything. So how can she open her big fat mouth? Confusing. The whole book, super confusing, terrible characters, great premise, terrible execution. It was a waste of my time. I could have read a much better book instead of this one, but what you gonna do? That's about it for now. I'm getting angry. So don't read Don't Look Back. Maybe read something else that she's written. If I ever have time, I'll put it on a TBR, and if I ever have time, I might get around to it. But yeah, Don't Look Back could have been great. It wasn't. So now I won't look back. See you later. Bye.